Kamikakushi, literally hidden by the gods, but more commonly translated into English as spirited away, is a term and a concept that for centuries has served as a way for the Japanese to explain the unexplainable. And to be more precise, it was and still is used to explain many of the country's numerous missing person cases. As of the making of this video, more than 90,000 people are reported missing in Japan. And this isn't exactly a recent phenomenon either. The land of the rising sun has a long history with people seemingly just vanishing into thin air, and whether it is in folklore or in actual real-life situations, the centuries-old concept of Kamikakushi is as relevant in Japan of the 21st century as it's ever been. A victim of Kamikakushi is said to have been abducted by some kind of supernatural being, ranging from well-intentioned deities to bird-like, mountain-dwelling demons like the Tengu. Kamikakushi is much more than mere superstition or fear of the supernatural though. Above all else, it represents an elaborate coping mechanism for those who inexplicably lost someone they loved. After all, a person who was spirited away might not have met a tragic fate, but was perhaps simply taken on an exciting journey into another realm. Now, whether you want to believe in the concept of Kamikakushi, and believe me, I am neither superstitious nor am I a religious person by any means, there are some missing person cases that certainly seem to defy logic. Today, I would like to examine 3 such cases, including the story of a 48-year-old Japanese housewife who mysteriously disappeared among a crowd of tourists at a shrine, the sudden vanishing of a 4-year-old boy that occurred in mere seconds, and the enigmatic disappearance of an entire family and their dog, who left behind a home filled with more questions than answers. All 3 of these cases are considered to be unsolved, but we will get into some of the theories about what might actually have happened in this video as well. Of course, you're more than welcome to share your own theories, ideas, and potential details that I missed out on in the comments down below. So, let's get started. These are 3 of Japan's most mysterious, unsolved missing person cases. It was on May 3rd, 1998, that 48-year-old Shizuka Noriko, along with her husband, daughter, grandson, aunt, uncle, and mother-in-law, decided to go on a family trip to visit Gunma Prefecture's Miyozawa Akagi Shrine. It was a cloudy, rainy Sunday morning that coincided with the Golden Week, one of Japan's longest holiday periods of the year. Not exactly the ideal weather to go visit a popular tourist destination in another prefecture, but regardless, and in hopes of the weather clearing up eventually, the family embarked on what would be a 110-kilometer trip from their hometown of Shiroishi, Chiba Prefecture to the foot of Gunma's Mount Akagi. Much to their disappointment, the weather had not improved by the time they reached their destination around 11:30 a.m. Nevertheless, a multitude of tourists had gathered at Akagi Shrine that day to make small monetary offerings to the gods, as is tradition. And eventually, Noriko's husband and her uncle chose to join the crowd despite the heavy rainfall, while the women and Noriko's grandson were to wait in the car until the 2 men returned. The women and the boy waited in the car for about 20 to 30 minutes, when suddenly, Noriko decided that she too should make her way to the shrine to quickly offer her prayers, planning to return immediately after. She grabbed her red umbrella, took a 100 yen coin and a 1 yen coin from her wallet, exited the car, and set off through the rain towards the shrine, alone. Those who remained in the car watched her go, unaware that this would be the last time that they would ever see her. Because just minutes later, Noriko would inexplicably vanish without a trace, never to be seen again. It didn't take long for Noriko's daughter to start worrying about her mother, especially after Noriko's husband and uncle had returned to the car without Noriko, who should long have returned from her quick shrine visit at that point. Soon, the whole Shizuka family began looking for Noriko all around Akagi Shrine, but she was nowhere to be found among the crowds of visitors. As minutes turned into hours, it became clear that something wasn't quite right. And eventually, the Shizuka family decided to contact the police to report Noriko as missing. For the following 10 days, a search team consisting of 100 people combed the entire area surrounding Akagi Shrine, from overgrown forests to mountain pathways, in search for any kind of clue about Noriko's whereabouts. Still, no trace of the 48-year-old whatsoever came up. Besides the lack of clues left behind by Noriko, there seemed to be no witnesses who saw anyone resembling her that day either, all despite just how busy Akagi Shrine was that day. The only exception came from a single report of a woman matching Noriko's description spotted the day after her disappearance near a forest road about 3 kilometers or less than 2 miles from the shrine. Unfortunately, nothing ever came of this lead. Safe to say, investigators were kind of perplexed, and one can only imagine the anguish the family had to endure. Having a loved one vanish so suddenly, with countless questions left unanswered. And as the search for Noriko dragged on, the questions just kept on piling up. Because shortly after her disappearance, the Shizuka family began receiving a series of unsettling phone calls. Each call came from a different number, all traced to either Osaka or Yonago, cities far away from the Shizuka family's hometown of Shiroishi on the opposite side of Japan. But every time they answered one of these calls, there was nothing but silence on the other end. The calls eventually just stopped, again offering no new leads to the family or investigators whatsoever. Basically, the investigation around Shizuka Noriko had hit a dead end almost as soon as it began. So, what the hell happened on May 3rd, 1998? Let's start looking into some popular theories, shall we? One of these theories argues that the 48-year-old's disappearance may stand in connection with a health condition that she suffered from. Noriko was known to have an issue with her right ear that often caused her to experience nausea, dizziness, loss of balance, and could even make her faint. Commenting on a post about the disappearance of Shizuka Noriko, Reddit user Chiri Cherry Cheeky wrote up a pretty detailed description on their experiences with a disorder of the inner ear that sounds very similar to what Noriko suffered from, called Meniere's disease. Meniere's disease can cause what Chiri Cherry Cheeky describes as quote-unquote attacks of vertigo, which can last up to an hour and are so intense that walking in a straight line, and even walking at all for a certain period of time after such an attack becomes quite literally impossible. Not only that, but according to the same Redditor, weather can greatly affect the severity and the likelihood of such an attack, with rainy weather being one of the most common triggers. And remember, it was raining quite heavily when the Shizuka family visited Akagi Shrine. Noriko reportedly also had a hearing aid that helped her alleviate some of these symptoms, but she had lost that hearing aid just before making the trip to Gunma Prefecture. It seems that all the ingredients required for a severe vertigo attack, as Chiri Cherry Cheeky calls it, came together that day, and it is hard to ignore the possibility that Noriko started feeling faint or became disoriented on her way to the shrine. Perhaps she fell down a slope or a cliff as a result. Out of all the different theories surrounding this case, this is probably the most plausible one in my opinion. But it does make you wonder. If Noriko had become disoriented and lost near the foot of Mount Akagi, then how could a 10-day search with around 100 people combing the area around Akagi Shrine have turned up absolutely no evidence? Like Noriko's easy-to-spot red umbrella that she surely would have dropped if she had some sort of unfortunate accident, or perhaps even a dead body. Nothing of the sort was ever found, and it's hard to imagine that a slightly overweight 48-year-old woman could have gotten far, especially while potentially suffering from a severe vertigo attack as well. Some theorize that instead of getting lost at Akagi Shrine, Noriko was perhaps kidnapped by somebody. This particular theory partly stems from a couple of statements made by none other than Noriko's daughter shortly after her mother's disappearance. The last time that she saw her mother was when she herself exited the car in order to comfort her son. This was only a couple of minutes after Noriko had left for the shrine, but there was actually something slightly off about what she saw at that moment. Noriko was walking away from the shrine instead of towards it. Again, mere minutes after leaving the car, meaning that she certainly wasn't on her way back already. Is there maybe a simple explanation for this strange little detail, like perhaps Noriko was heading for the restroom or something? Or was there someone forcing her that way? Again, some point to the daughter's own testimony as potential evidence of a kidnapping. She recalled passing a group of 3 suspicious-looking men, wearing strange hats pulled over their heads. Personally, I wouldn't read too much into this. For one thing, it was raining heavily that day, and wearing a hat in such weather isn't exactly unusual or anything. Plus, it was never clarified what made these strange hats so strange in the first place. A somewhat more compelling piece of evidence regarding a potential kidnapping surfaced about 7 months after Noriko's disappearance. By then, the case had gained media attention across Japan, allowing it to reach a wide audience, including someone who had been at Akagi Shrine on May 3, 1998, at roughly the same time as the Shizuka family. And incredibly, this person had filmed a video at the shrine, which may have captured Noriko's final moments before she vanished without a trace. Now unfortunately, I was not able to find this video in its entirety anywhere online. But what I was able to find is a grand total of 2 frames from the video, both showing what appears to be a woman holding a red, pinkish umbrella. And allegedly, one part of the video showed this same woman offering her umbrella to another person. Could it be this frame right here? I'm not sure. We are dealing with some crunchy late 90s home video resolution here after all. So it's pretty hard to tell, but it does look like there could be someone standing behind the woman holding the umbrella here. But let's assume the woman in the video was offering her umbrella to a stranger. It still doesn't seem like a strong indication of a kidnapping, especially since even Noriko's own family, after reviewing the footage, concluded that the woman most likely wasn't her. And so unfortunately, this home video, which could have held so many crucial clues to Shizuka Noriko's disappearance, ended up providing no valuable insight into what happened at Akagi Shrine that day. Nor did it reveal the identity of any potential kidnapper. And speaking of which, who would even kidnap Noriko, a 48-year-old Japanese housewife from Chiba Prefecture? And for what reason? Some think that perhaps Noriko saw something, a crime or even a murder, on her way to the shrine. But then again, the foot of Mount Akagi was quite crowded that day. Not exactly the best environment to commit any sort of crime, in broad daylight no less. Some say that North Korea kidnapped Noriko, then there were the inevitable theories about a potential UFO abduction. Again, in broad daylight near a tourist attraction during Golden Week. Makes a lot of sense. In fact, kidnapping Noriko at all seems nearly impossible given the time of day and the large number of people likely present at the shrine at the time. No one reported any suspicious behavior or distressing sounds, no screams, nothing out of the ordinary. So, while I wouldn't rule out the possibility of a kidnapping entirely, I personally find it to be far less likely than the aforementioned vertigo theory. But get this, some people even believe that Noriko never came to Mount Akagi that day in the first place. They suggest that her own family might have killed her and staged her mysterious disappearance at Akagi Shrine in order to divert any potential investigation. It's an intriguing, though rather wild theory, and of course, there's no real evidence to support it. Ultimately, the case of Shizuka Noriko was closed in 2008, 10 years after her disappearance. And even now, more than 2.5 decades later, no one can say for sure what happened to that poor lady on that fateful day in May of 1998. And not for a lack of trying either. The Shizuka family went to great lengths to investigate Noriko's disappearance, and eventually they grew so desperate for an answer that they ended up hiring an American psychic, Gail St. John, to provide some insight into the matter. St. John claimed that Noriko was beaten up and abducted by a young man asking her for help, and after she was let go by her kidnapper, she fell off a cliff in confusion and died. Now, the statement of a psychic is of course not worth a dime when it comes to actual tangible evidence. But honestly, if it provided Noriko's family with even a small sense of closure, I'd like to think that the psychic's opinion on the matter holds at least some value. In that sense, it wouldn't be all that different from how the idea of Kamikakushi has provided comfort to the bereaved friends and family of Japan's mysteriously missing people for hundreds of years. On March 5th, 1989, the Matsuoka family, consisting of 4-year-old Shinya, his parents, his older sister, and his younger brother, set off on a long journey from Ushiku in Ibaraki Prefecture all the way to Tokushima Prefecture's Mima district. A trip prompted by the recent passing of Shinya's grandmother, with a funeral scheduled for the following day. The family planned to stay with relatives in Tokushima for a couple of days before returning to Ibaraki. It was on the morning of March 7th, the day following the funeral, that around 8 AM, Shinya's father Masanobu took both his 4-year-old son and his 2-year-old brother for a walk around the neighborhood surrounding the relative's home. Around 10 minutes into the walk, Masanobu thought that it was time to head back to the house, but Shinya refused. And so, the father decided to drop his younger son off at the house in order to take Shinya out for one more walk around the neighborhood. On their way back to the relative's house, it was Masanobu walking in front, his 2-year-old son in his arms, and Shinya right behind him. Leading up to the house was a flight of stairs, approximately 10 meters or 33 feet long. Upon making it up the flight of stairs, the father approaches the entrance of the house, takes a look back, and clearly sees that Shinya had made it up the stairs as well. He then quickly went inside the house, dropped off his 2-year-old, and immediately left the house again. But his 4-year-old son Shinya was gone. Surely the boy must have been nearby. The father started searching the property around the house. No sign of Shinya. Soon, the entire family joined in on the search effort. Then, the local fire brigade too started looking for the young boy, combing the surrounding mountains that Shinya very well could have gotten lost in. Still, nothing. By 10 AM, less than 2 hours after the boy's disappearance, the local police was on the case. They mobilized around 15 officers that joined a team of around 100 riot police officers, firefighters, and locals that all went looking for Matsuoka Shinya. The following day, around 200 people in total were looking for the boy. But as the search continued for weeks and months, not a single trace of the 4-year-old could be found anywhere in and around Mima district. It was a puzzling situation, to say the least. According to the father, a mere 20 seconds passed between the moment he last saw Shinya at the top of the stairs and when he returned outside to find him gone. How could a 110 centimeter tall 4-year-old boy have gotten far enough from his relative's house that not even 100 or 200 locals familiar with the area and its mountains could locate him? In less than half a minute, no less. Now, in order to speculate about what could have happened to Shinya, we will need to take a closer look at the area surrounding the site of the disappearance. Unfortunately, we do not have the exact address of the house, but what we do know is that it was located somewhere right here, going up the eastern side of a mountain. Of course, these satellite images are pretty recent, and the case occurred more than 3 decades ago. So, what we have right here is an image of the exact same area taken in 1991, a mere 2 years after Shinya's disappearance. Actually, not all that much has changed between then and now, and it's safe to assume that this is pretty much exactly what the area looked like in 1989. The first thing that comes to mind when hearing about the disappearance of Matsuoka Shinya is, of course, a kidnapping. It was regularly reported that the site of the disappearance was incredibly remote and secluded from the rest of the area. But ignoring the fact that the word remote is open for interpretation anyway, it really doesn't seem like there was truly nothing and no one around who could have possibly kidnapped a young boy. Now, if someone were to steal Shinya away from his parents, it's safe to assume that it must have been either a neighbor or someone else who lived nearby. There was a group of people doing field work around 100 meters away from the house, and they reportedly didn't see any unfamiliar or strange-looking cars or people entering the area that morning. If the Matsuoka's relative's house had truly been in the middle of nowhere, then I would consider a kidnapping highly unlikely. However, even without knowing the exact location, based on the general vicinity of Shinya's disappearance, I'm inclined to believe the house wasn't so isolated as to entirely rule out the possibility of a kidnapping, perhaps at the hands of someone who lived nearby. Doubts regarding a potential kidnapping only come up when taking into consideration several other details surrounding Shinya's disappearance. First of all, if someone forcefully took Shinya, then why didn't he scream for his dad, who was only a couple of meters away? Sure, he was only 4 years old, but he was reportedly also quite mature for his age. For instance, he was capable of telling people his parents' names, phone number, and home address. With that in mind, I would expect that if a stranger had tried to take him away, Shinya would have sensed something was wrong and surely would have screamed for help or reacted in some way. But let's say someone did manage to keep Shinya completely quiet while taking him away. It's certainly possible. Where would they have taken him? In such a short amount of time, no less. Search efforts for the boy basically began mere seconds after he had gone missing, and less than 2 hours later, more than 100 people were looking for him. If it was a neighbor, they could have hidden the boy somewhere in their own house, and maybe even joined the search effort to divert suspicion. Again, it's certainly in the realm of possibility, but at the same time, I feel like holding a young boy captive at home might require at least a certain amount of planning to keep him there without anyone looking for him in the surrounding area noticing. And if this was a kidnapping, it really must have been a spur-of-the-moment kind of thing. After all, the Matsuokas lived on the other side of the country, visiting the area on relatively short notice and only staying there for a couple of days. Of course, there's much more to speculate about. One particularly controversial detail is the infamous 20-second time frame during which Shinya went missing. The sheer abruptness of his disappearance is arguably the most perplexing aspect of the entire case, leading many to wonder if the father might not have been entirely truthful about what really happened during those crucial moments. This doesn't necessarily imply that Masanobu had any bad intentions, but in a shocking, stressful situation like this, minutes can literally feel like seconds, and it's possible that the man simply misjudged the amount of time that he took to make it back out the front door after catching one final glimpse of his son. Still, let's say Masanobu took 2 minutes to go back outside instead of just 20 seconds. It would still be a mystery how Shinya managed to disappear completely in an area where he was surrounded by mountains that, from what I've read online, are pretty damn steep as well. The only thing that the Matsuokas knew for sure at that moment was that their little Shinya was gone, for months without any physical evidence to point his parents, the police, or any of the countless locals that dedicated their precious time to finding the boy in the right direction. But the months following Shinya's disappearance weren't completely uneventful either. In fact, less than 2 weeks after the boy's disappearance, the Matsuokas received a somewhat mysterious phone call. On March 16th, the day before the Matsuokas were scheduled to return to Ibaraki Prefecture, the phone at their relative's home rang. Masanobu picked up the phone when a female voice asked, "Is your wife there?" Masanobu handed the phone over to his wife. "I am Nakahara Mariko's mother. My child is in the moon group of the Seikei kindergarten," the female voice said. She continued, "We have put together some money to support you. Where should I send it to? Are you returning home soon?" Shinya's mother told the woman that they planned to return home the following day, but it would be the last time that she would hear from the woman. A couple of days passed, and at some point, Shinya's mother started to wonder what this whole phone call was about. She inquired about the money that was allegedly collected for her and her family. Turns out there was no money collected, and there was no Nakahara Mariko attending Seikei kindergarten either. Seikei kindergarten was, however, the kindergarten that the Matsuoka's daughter attended at the time. Who was this woman, and how did she manage to get both the phone number of the Matsuoka's relative's house and the name of the kindergarten that their eldest child attended? To make this whole phone call even weirder, Shinya's mother distinctly remembered the woman speaking with a Tokushima accent. But Seikei kindergarten was obviously located in Ibaraki Prefecture, where the Matsuokas lived. The only plausible explanation I was able to find is that the woman on the phone might have been a journalist attempting to gather information from the mother, perhaps trying to obtain the family's home address to contact them and press for details about their child's disappearance. Either way, the call never brought forward any valuable leads in the search for Matsuoka Shinya, and the boy would stay mysteriously missing as months and years went by. During this time, the case maintained a pretty large media presence, and the Matsuoka family itself made around 50 appearances on television and even made their own phone number public in hopes of receiving some kind of valuable information about the possible whereabouts of their son. And actually, there were plenty of calls that came in between 1989 and 1998 too, with sightings of Shinya reported from all over Japan. The first noteworthy call came only 2 months after the incident, a call from Tokushima Prefecture no less. Someone spotted a man carrying a boy who looked like Shinya near the ocean in Tokushima, but when the witness attempted to get a better look at the boy's face, the man turned around, got into a white car, and drove off. Much like with the case of Shizuka Noriko, there are theories out there that North Korea was somehow involved in the disappearance of Matsuoka Shinya as well. In this case, though, that might not even be that far-fetched. The area where Shinya was allegedly spotted is known to be a place frequented by North Korean ships, and abductions on Japanese soil carried out by the DPRK are actually pretty damn common as well. Shinya was then spotted in Tokushima Prefecture once more in April of 1990, which unfortunately led to no further leads. Then that same year, he was spotted in front of a mall in Yonezawa, in northern Japan. Masanobu actually went there to hand out flyers and ask locals about his son's supposed presence in the area, and multiple locals did recall seeing the boy. Still, no further leads came of it. In 1991, a boy that resembled Shinya was seen at Tokushima's Tairi-Yuchi temple, together with a couple that was said to have been too old to be his actual parents. Shinya's mother went there to look for the boy. Again, no leads. In 1995, a man from Kuchan, Hokkaido claimed to know someone who had received a boy named Shinya as a gift from someone from Japan's main island. Nothing came of this piece of information either. Perhaps the two most intriguing sightings of Shinya, however, came in 1997 and 1998. The first of these two sightings came from a woman in Yokohama who supposedly spotted Shinya on the subway. The woman claimed she got goosebumps because the boy she saw looked so incredibly similar to Shinya. She also recalled that the boy was not well dressed and that he had bruises and injuries on both of his wrists that were sloppily covered up with bandages. When she spoke to the boy, he told her that he was being mistreated by an older man. The woman gave the boy her phone number and told him to call her in case he ever needs help. Apparently, the boy did call her once, but regardless, no further leads regarding the Shinya case ever came from this. But keeping the details of the Yokohama subway sighting in mind, the next sighting, which occurred in 1998, becomes all the more interesting. According to a cashier at a video rental store in the Jugoku region, a boy resembling Shinya, again with injured wrists just as the woman on the Yokohama subway had described a year earlier, took a Titanic postcard and showed it to a man he was with. According to the witness's testimony, the man looked like he could be a member of the Yakuza and appeared to have kept a close eye on the boy the entire time. When the man and the boy had left, the cashier went to tell the store owner about what just happened. But when they went outside to look for the man and the boy, they were already gone. The case of Matsuoka Shinya had hit yet another dead end, and for the following 2 decades, the case would quiet down significantly despite the family's ongoing efforts to find their missing family member. But then, in 2018, 29 years after Shinya had vanished in a matter of seconds, the Matsuokas were presented with what was perhaps the biggest lead, and with that the greatest sense of hope that they had ever felt since his disappearance. On January 31st of that year, a man going under the pseudonym Wada Ryuto appeared on the TBS Missing Persons special program. Wada said he had been imprisoned by an unknown man for 17 years, from the age of 4 to the age of 21. Of course, Wada's age at the time of his kidnapping matched that of Matsuoka Shinya, and viewers of the broadcast were quick to notice that the man looked quite similar to Shinya as well. A discovery that soon made way throughout Japanese media and the internet. Could this be Matsuoka Shinya, the boy who went missing 29 years earlier? The Tokushima Prefectural Police were quick to set up a DNA test to determine whether or not Wada Ryuto was in fact Matsuoka Shinya, and only a week after the special program had aired, the results were in, shared by Shinya's father on his Facebook page. Unfortunately, Wada Ryuto was not the missing Shinya. It's been 35 years since the disappearance of Shinya as of the making of this video, and it pains me to say this, but I don't think we'll ever be able to find out what happened to the 4-year-old, who would now be close to reaching his 40th birthday. And even if he was ever found, it would be kind of a bittersweet moment. While it would be incredible to see Shinya reunited with his father and his siblings, his mother Keiko died in 2020, meaning that no matter what the future brings, she passed away without ever being able to find an answer as to what happened to her son. Our third and final case for today is a bit different from what we talked about so far. For one, what we are dealing with here is the disappearance of not one person, but an entire family of 4 people. In addition, these 4 people were eventually found after they had gone missing. This case took place in Hiroshima Prefecture's Seracho, a quiet little town with a current population of around 15,000 people. It's the kind of town where nearly everyone knows nearly everyone, and one of the most respected and well-known families in town was the Yamagami family, including 58-year-old Yamagami Masahiro, a high-ranking employee at a local construction company and the son of a wealthy family of landowners, his wife Junko, 51 years old and working for a travel company, 79-year-old Yamagami Saegusa, Masahiro's mother and Junko's mother-in-law, and the couple's only daughter, Chie, a 26-year-old elementary school teacher in Takehara City. The disappearance of the Yamagami family dates back to June 4th, 2001, when the mother, Junko, was scheduled to have a meeting at work before going on a business trip to Dalian, China. When Junko failed to show up for both, her co-workers started to get worried and went to check the Yamagami family home. When they got there, what they discovered was a house that was completely in order, but also completely empty. Both Masahiro and Junko, as well as the husband's mother Saegusa, who lived together with the married couple, and the family dog Leo, were all gone, and so was the husband's car. And as it turned out, their daughter Chie, who lived alone in an apartment in Takehara City, around 30 kilometers from her parents' home, had also failed to show up for work that day and had similarly gone missing without a trace. With the Yamagamis gone for several hours, relatives contacted the police to report them as missing, and they would remain missing for days, weeks, and even months. More than a full year went by, and it seemed like so many other similar cases, this one too would fail to bring forward any substantial clues or evidence on the whereabouts of the missing persons. But that would change around 15 months after the Yamagamis had seemingly vanished into thin air. In September of 2002, with there being a lot less rainfall than is usual for Seracho, the water levels of the local Kiyomaru Dam's reservoir had started to recede significantly. And it was here that a couple of locals made a shocking discovery. An entire car was submerged in the waters of the reservoir. A white Toyota Sprinter that, after the police had pulled it out of the water, turned out to have license plates that matched those of Yamagami Takahiro's car. And inside the car were the skeletons of 4 humans and a dog, later confirmed to be those of Yamagami Takahiro, Junko, Saegusa, Chie, and their dog Leo. It was a tragic finale to a 15-month-long search that had friends and family still hoping for a more positive outcome. But beyond being incredibly depressing, what happened to the Yamagami family was above all very strange if you look into the details of their disappearance. Let me explain. The last of the 4 family members to ever be seen alive by another person was the daughter, Chie. On the evening of June 3rd, the day before the family went missing, Chie had been out and about in Takehata City together with a colleague from work, who overheard Chie telling her mother on the phone that she would be visiting her parents' house that night in order to pick up some cosmetics that she had left while staying there over the weekend. According to the colleague's testimony, Chie parted ways with her at around 9:30 p.m. that evening. So we can say for sure that at this point, Chie and the rest of the Yamagami family were still alive and well. So when exactly did they disappear? There exist 2 different testimonies that allow us to at least establish a rough time frame in which the family had left their parents' home in Seracho. The first of these 2 testimonies comes from the man who delivered the newspaper to the Yamagami house. According to him, when he arrived at the house to deliver the newspaper, there was no sign of anyone being home, and more importantly, the only car standing in the driveway was that of Chie. Masahiro's car, the white Toyota Sprinter that was found at the bottom of the Kiyomaru Dam a year later, was not in the driveway at this moment in time, meaning that sometime between Chie leaving Takehata City at 9:30 p.m. and when the newspaper was delivered between 4 to 5 a.m. the next morning, the Yamagami family had left the house in Masahiro's car. The second testimony, on the other hand, potentially gives us a much more exact time for when the family might have left the house. One of the Yamagami's neighbors recalled hearing a car door slam shut at around 10:50 p.m. However, it is unclear if this door slamming sound was related to the family getting in Masahiro's car, or if it was Chie exiting her car upon arriving at the house. According to Google Maps, the fastest route from Chie's apartment in Takehata City to her parents' home in Seracho would take around 50 minutes to complete. Since the neighbor heard the door shut around 80 minutes after Chie reportedly left Takehata City, I think it is very likely that the family was in the process of leaving the house at around 10:50 p.m. on June 3rd, 2001. And that is where some questions arise. I find it pretty strange for a family of 4, including an almost 80-year-old lady that reportedly had scoliosis and serious trouble walking, as well as 2 50-plus-year-olds and their daughter who all had work the next morning, to just get up and drive somewhere at close to 11 p.m. But things only get even more confusing as we delve into more details about the Yamagami's disappearance. Perhaps the strangest thing about this whole entire case is the condition that the Yamagamis left their house in, and by that I mean how incredibly clean and tidy it was. A legitimate reason for leaving the house that late at night with a grandma that is barely able to walk and with work the next morning is if somehow the family was forced to leave the house in a hurry because of some kind of threat. Something or someone that the family had to escape from, which could also help explain why exactly the father drove the car into the water. But the inside of the house implies the exact opposite. There were no signs of the Yamagamis ever having been in any kind of stressful situation that night. While the back door was open, the front door and all the windows were locked, with no signs of an attempted break-in. There were no bloodstains anywhere in the house, no signs of a fight or a struggle anywhere, and there was no robbery taking place that night either. Junko, who, if you remember, was supposed to board a flight to China the following day, had prepared around 150,000 yen in cash for her trip. A pretty substantial amount of money that was left at the house completely untouched. Other items found at the house were Junko and Chia's cell phones and licenses, as well as Masahiro's pager. All clothes around the house were neatly folded. The beds were all made, and on the kitchen table, an entire breakfast was already prepared, waiting to be enjoyed the following morning. The light in the kitchen was left on, and strangely enough, the whole family except for the father left the house in only their pajamas and sandals, the only articles of clothing missing at the house. There are a lot of somewhat conflicting details here that suggest that maybe the Yamagami family was somehow in a hurry to leave the house, but at the same time wasn't in immediate danger either. And why would they be? By all accounts, the entire Yamagami family was a well-liked, respected family in the area. There were some rumors about Masahiro's brother having some financial problems, but not enough to get Masahiro himself involved in any sort of trouble with shady people. The most popular theory here seems to be that the family members voluntarily ended their lives together that night for some reason. But again, why would they? Chie is said to have been incredibly popular at her workplace and was about to get married soon as well. It seems like there was no reason for her to end her own life. But let's assume that since Chie visited her parents' home somewhat spontaneously that night, that she was pulled into something that she was not originally supposed to be a part of. What reasons could the rest of the family possibly have had for wanting to die together? I honestly fail to see a reason why Masahiro's 79-year-old mother would want to end her own life, and there is nothing to suggest that she wanted to do so. Allegedly, she was at first opposed to her son's marriage to Junko, but actually, Junko and Masahiro's mother are said to have gotten along just fine in the end. Junko herself was said to have really been looking forward to her trip to China, and as mentioned before, had already prepared the necessary funds beforehand, meaning that she was definitely planning to make that trip the next day. And generally, she was thought to have been pretty content with her life. Ignoring the dog, Leo, that only leaves the father, Masahiro. The guy earned a fine salary, and despite a couple of unfounded rumors regarding Junko's supposed affair with a co-worker that conveniently only started circulating after the family had gone missing, the couple's marriage seemed to have been a pretty healthy one as well. However, shortly before the incident on June 3rd, Junko did allegedly tell some people around her that her husband seemed somewhat distressed lately. That is obviously a very vague statement, something that could imply literally everything from stress at work to more serious problems in Masahiro's personal life. Still, many seem to believe that the father is the most likely culprit behind this whole incident. Masahiro was, after all, the one behind the wheel of the car, and the fact that he was the only one wearing casual clothing that night instead of pajamas is a tiny little detail that does, however, stick out somewhat. It is often speculated that Masahiro could have had his whole family take sleeping pills before putting them all in his car and driving them into the water. But no such pills were ever found in the house, and by the time the bodies of the Yamagamis were salvaged from the dam reservoir, it was too late for an autopsy to determine whether or not the family members had actually been drugged. But even if the father did drug his whole family, why bother bringing the dog along as well? And why kill your own daughter who was just about to get married? Now, the human mind is of course very complex, and outside appearances can be incredibly misleading, especially in a country like Japan, where so much effort is put into keeping up said outside appearances. Maybe there was something wrong with the Yamagamis that no one really knew about. But overall, just like with the previous two cases, there's a lot more questions than answers around the disappearance of the Yamagami family. Most of which will most likely never be answered, leaving a lot of room for speculation about how four seemingly happy and successful people and a cute innocent little dog can suddenly just vanish overnight, never to be seen alive again. So what are your theories about what actually happened to Noriko, Shinya, and the Yamagami family? Feel free to share your thoughts and your opinions in the comments down below. Special thanks go out to my loyal Patreon supporters listed here, including Bobby Vu, Javier Soravia, Capybara Chuck, Turom, Daniel Dees, RK0, White Gilden, Justin Down, Yoko the Space Whale, Steve Matsui, Cats and Soup, Chart B-Man, and Ben Herodine. And to all of you who decided to click on this video, as always, thank you so much for watching. Sayonara.